Welcome to the Over the Hump podcast. Your gateway to the world of the iconic Brahman breed of cattle. At BRC Ranch, our passion for Brahman cattle runs deep. Join us as we delve into the heart of this extraordinary breed, unveiling its rich history, exploring industry trends, and sharing captivating stories that define the American Brahman. BRC Ranch stands as the pinnacle of Brahman excellence in America, boasting a decade-long legacy of champions and housing the finest Brahman bulls worldwide. It's not just about cattle, it's about a legacy that reverberates across ranches and hearts. Brought to you by BRC Ranch, where the Brahman legacy thrives and stories are woven into the very fabric of ranching. This is Over the Hump.
Hey guys, y'all are really in for a treat on this episode. I have over an hour and a half worth of conversation with Jake Dixon, who is the owner of Dixon Ranches. They are a Brahman and F1 operation in the very small town of Dodge, Texas, which is in Walker County, kind of around Huntsville. And we had just an amazing conversation. Most of our topics talk about the concept of what kind of cattle work good for Dixon Ranches. We talk a lot about functionality. We've got a lot of history here. We kind of go down the rabbit hole of some old Brahman bulls that the Dixons used in their operation. It is just a really, really great podcast. But then again, what do you expect when you have two Aggies on a podcast like this? So anyway, sit back, enjoy. It's an hour and a half. We hope you love this episode of Over the Hump. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Over the Hump podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Cottrell, and today I have my friend Jake Dixon with us. Welcome, Jake.
Hello, Rachel. Good to be here.
Hi, good to be here too. Good to have you here too. And so Jake and I have actually been friends for a long time through college, but if you are on Facebook, you're probably familiar with their operation, Dixon Ranches, Huntsville, Texas. Is it Huntsville, Jake, or do you go by Madisonville?
Actually, Dodge, Texas is the center of operations. Now, I'll elaborate a little more about that in a minute.
Okay, awesome. Well, so we are just happy to have you here today, Brahman and F1 cattle. And so, yeah, let's get right to it. If you don't mind, would you just start off with giving us like a history of Dixon Ranches and history of your operation?
Sure. So, when I talk about Dodge, that's a little special to me because I am actually, people have asked me before, like, how did you wind up in Dodge, Texas, which is about 400 people in the little town. It's about 10 miles east of Huntsville. And like, why are you there? And the simple answer, I guess, is family heritage. I'm actually a seventh generation of my family to be in Dodge. My great grandmother was fourth generation, and she was a direct descendant of William Palmer, who actually founded Dodge back in 1825. So my roots run a little deep to the land and to that area. So that's the little story about where I'm from. I have raised Brahmins for the last 25 years. I made a run in it back in the 90s. Whenever I was still in high school, my grandfather was against purebred Brahman cattle and thought that the only cattle that we could have were crossbreds. And so I was being smart and went to a dispersal sale and bought myself a red Brahman cow and brought her home, and she was open. And when she cycled, my grandfather told me that, she's not any good. She's a non-breeder, typical Brahman cow, and hauled her to the sale barn for me. So I got off to a bit of a slow start because I was met with fierce opposition to my dreams of having Brahmins.
Okay, let me just stop you right there because I want to make sure I understand it. You bought her in a dispersal sale, you purchased, paid for her, but you never got a calf out of her.
I never got a calf.
Oh my gosh. And that was in the 90s?
That was in the 90s.
I was going to ask you, Before you told the whole story, I was going to ask if you remembered what sale it was, but I'm sure you do remember. You may not want to share it.
I remember it well. It was the Velity Ranch dispersal. And I bought that particular cow because I was with a really good family friend and we were there together. And I was, of course, they were in the oil business. So they had all the money to buy whichever ones they wanted, but I was on a budget.
Mhm,
I was a high school student.
mhm,
And so I'm looking for a very specific animal. And I say I was on a budget. I had my own cows. I'll back up just a little bit. I started with 7 cows that were given to me by my parents and taken care of by my grandpa. And our deal was I would help and work. Of course, I was 8 or 9 years old when I received these cows, but I put in the time, the work. I fill feed troughs and help put out hay and help work cows and my quote unquote pasture rent, even though it was on owned land,
mhm.
my my rent was paid for by my labor. And I love that because I love the cows. And my parents were going to sell those cows, and I'll never forget this. I have to share this. My parents were going to sell out their cows, and I'll never forget sitting in the back of the truck when the cows were in the pen, and I threw the worst fit as a child that I I threw a screaming, in the back of the truck, laying down, flailing my arms and legs. And, oh, my cows! You can't sell my cows. I mean, as a child, that's all I wanted to do was have cows. Go feed cubes and just see my cows, and they were going to sell them. And so my grandpa and my parents worked out some arrangement, and the cows went with my grandpa's cows, and they were now my cows. My parents gave them to me. My grandfather took care of them, and my fits don't normally pay off, but that little fit, I guess, is the basis for everything that I have. I was the oldest child and oldest grandchild, and so they had to take care of their baby, and I got to keep my cows. And I guess that's what started everything. From the time I was about 10 years old, I got my cows and I got my check for my cows every year for my calves. And I saved that money. And as I would build it up, I would go and pick additional cows from my grandpa's herd. And this is early 90s. I was a kid. I'd pick certain heifers that I liked and I'd buy them from my grandpa and I would add them to my herd. And so it kept getting bigger and bigger and to a point where I probably had as many cows as my grandpa did. And so I was very fortunate to have family that supported me there and got me off to a good start.
Well, I love that story.
As long as they weren't registered Brahmins.
Yeah, because we have so many similarities in that. You know, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
45.
Okay, so we're the same. Yeah. So I would guess that our grandparents are probably around the same age, or at least in the same generation. And our story is very similar in the whole, you get free pasture rent in exchange for labor. And then when you said you got the number of your cows almost reached the same as the number of your grandpa's, you know, we ran into that same problem too, which is what prompted us to actually start buying land of our own because we were like in our situation, I'm like a super spreadsheet financial person, and I wanted to make sure that our free rent was not, I get what's the word, taking up more than the labor we provided because when you start getting more cows, it could get lopsided. So I like had a spreadsheet that was, how many cows, how much hours of labor, what's the salary, all of that. But for us, because of that spreadsheet, that's when I started realizing, hey, our free labor we might not be providing enough free labor, and that's what prompted us to start buying land. But I love that concept because for so many, it's how you get a start and it's how you learn to not be lazy. not be entitled.
That's right. Well, it gives you some initiative. You see, I was provided that opportunity, and
Mhm.
when you're given that opportunity, you're like, okay, well, if I invest myself in this operation, I'm gonna, and I just love the cows. I tried to bring something to the table in regards to what can I do as a kid, even as a kid, what can I do to bring value to our operation? And for my grandfather, that was I had, and I still do, a near photographic memory. When a calf is born, I can go back and I can tell, even on a crossbred cow, I can go back and I can tell you that calf goes to that cow on hundreds of cows. And my grandfather relied on me anytime we were moving or selling, or he would not do anything without me being there, even when I was 12 or 13, because he didn't want to make any mistakes or pull the wrong cow off the wrong calf off the wrong cow. So I guess I kind of earned my keep there by with my mind, in that I knew which ones were which. And I love working them. From the time I was about 9 or 10 years old, if my grandfather, if I heard a trailer rattle going to the Dixon farm, by my house, if I heard the trailer rattling, then if I thought he was working cows without me, I'd get on my bicycle and ride down there. Like, what's going on? I can't miss anything. I wanted to be a part of it. I loved working them. I would, I've jokingly said this before. I think I would have sacrificed opening presents on Christmas morning to get the opportunity to go check cows and fill range meal troughs. We did things differently back then. We fed salt and meal and different things. And I would have, fine, we'll delay opening gifts because I want to go feed cows Christmas morning. So I was just different. I loved the whole process.
I love that. I also want to touch on the dispersal sale because stuff like that gets me so mad. Like there is nothing that makes me madder is when I hear like people getting screwed in the Brahmin business. I hate to say it.
And unfortunately, it happens all too often.
It does, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, it's a dispersal sale, so you really got nothing. Like you had no guarantee. It's not like you could return it and exchange it for a different cow.
Right. Well, the cow produced two of the high selling females in the sale that were young. And I mean, she had a yearling heifer and she had a 2 year old heifer. And I think there was a 4 year old cow that were out of this cow. She was a gorgeous cow. She was a red cow. And so the cow had been a good producer, but she was just open. And so, to the cow's credit and the ranch's credit, she really didn't get an opportunity because the cow bred. She took the bull, and then 30 days later, she took the bull again. And that's when my grandfather, we're talking, I owned the cow 40 days. My grandpa's like, nope, she's
Mhm.
just another unproductive bramer. She's on down the, and don't bring any more of those things home. You can have all the cows you want, but you're not having any bramers. And I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work out so well for me.
Well, that is also an interesting, like the 40-day time window. Sounds like your grandpa was either like, look, she either takes in two AIs or she's gone.
Absolutely. That's how we operate. I mean, a cow's going to have a calf, and we'll talk more about that later, I'm sure, but a cow's going to have a calf every 12 months or she doesn't have a place in the herd. And he was a bit of a tyrant about that. And especially when it was something like a Brahman that he was against. And he was always so excited for me with my cows. Anything to do with my cows, he was so excited. And except for Brahmins. He was absolutely against them, and said, just whatever you do, don't ever raise Brahmins. And we see how that worked out.
Oh gosh, I do have a confession to make because I would think in a perfect world that everybody who buys cattle will be able to get a full return on their investment through a couple of calves, but that's not always the case. And I have seen it so much in my lifetime as a Brahman breeder. I've just seen so many people get screwed. I have like this trauma response that anytime I'm buying cattle and I'm factoring in my head like the prices, I always revert to, okay, what is the worst case scenario if I have to sell this animal at the auction barn? How much am I going to lose?
Absolutely. What is her salvage value?
Yes, it is. I have like a spreadsheet on purchased cattle that we buy, and I like have my purchase price, and then every year, whatever her calf brings, I add into that. So I know when each cow is paid off and how long it took. And salvage value is definitely a column in in that spreadsheet.
Well, and thankfully, right now, those salvage values are significantly higher than normal.
That's right. Well, let's move into, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit. Let's move into just kind of give us, oh gosh, we didn't get too far in the history, honestly, because we didn't even talk about Texas A&M. Do you want to share that, like your college education?
I, yeah, I'll briefly touch on that. I went to A&M with the intent maybe of going to vet school or with the intent of doing something in ag business. I was told my entire life that whatever you do, your cattle will be a secondary income. They'll allow you to accumulate wealth due to tax benefits, but your cattle will never be your mainstay. You're smart. You're not going to be in the cow business. You need to understand that. You're going to be something successful and come back to cows. And so I was encouraged and to to go get an education, which I did. I graduated, and as I encountered some of those people at A&M, Dr. Howard Hesby was a big influence on me, as I know he was so many Aggies. And we went on that 2-week field trip where we went all over the country, viewing different operations and just different production styles. And then I was able to sit under the genius of people like Dr. Jim Sanders and listen. And I my love and my passion for cattle, it just sort of kind of started bubbling out. Like I can't do it. I can't go get a real job. I have to do cows. Just really A&M and the animal science department there had a huge part in the trajectory of, I guess, my life, professionally, because they opened the door to maybe not such a seeing things on such a small scale, and opened up my mind and some doors there to where I saw a bigger picture. And so I graduated in 2003, and I haven't looked back since. And I'm very thankful for that time at A&M because it was instrumental in my going on. It did for me exactly the opposite of what my family wanted it to do, and that was don't get in the cow business. And then I went to A&M and M and I fell in love with animal science, and I'm like, no, no, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So after I graduated, I bought a feed and farm supply store that had been in business for 40 years in Huntsville, and I kept that for several years. It was very good. The funny part about the cows that I was told I should never have is the cows paid my A&M tuition. They paid my rent every month. My cows paid for all my bills to put me through A&M. My cows were collateral that allowed me to buy the feed store. My cows were, while I was not supposed to ever have cows, or cows were not supposed to be good to me, my cows have played an instrumental role in all of these major stepping stones, I guess, in my life on a business perspective that have If I wanted to buy land, I had cows as collateral, and I didn't owe money against them. So it was the cows have been good to me, and I I love them. They allowed me to just get into different things, and so, but I'm still a rancher for a living. Cows to this day. I have some other supplemental stuff, but cows pay my bills. So
Oh, I love that. Did you have Dr. Turner as a professor at A&M?
I did not.
Oh, okay. Because I remember, like you can remember yourself at certain place and times, and I remember we were often in Clayburg a lot together, and that's who I took beef cattle production from, but I didn't remember if you were in that class or a different one. Did you have Dr. Bowman?
I actually I took it beef cattle production. I actually took as like a senior. I took it way deep in, and just because I was in so many other things, and the guy's first name was Gary, and I don't remember his last name, but he really wasn't one of our he wasn't one of the mainstays, and I think he was I can't tell you, Rachel, who it was.
He might have been a grad student or maybe like the beef center manager because I do remember him. I just don't remember his last name. But anyway, well, let's move on to you said your cows have always been good to you, and I love that. Let's move into tell us about the type of cattle you like to breed and why. What's the typical Dixon Ranches prototype?
Functional. If I were going to sum it up, and I think functional takes on a variety of faces. Where my first cattle came from, and I'm not going back into history, but I'm going to touch on this. Dr. Don Ekval in
Mhm.
Madisonville was a very good friend of mine and a mentor, and he's really kind of where I got my real start in Brahmins. He was very special to me. We lost him a couple of years ago, but he had a very specific type of Brahman cow that he liked. And of course, he was kind of a student of Guy Jeans, which Guy Jeans was a little, I mean, was a brilliant cowman, but those cattle didn't have quite enough oomph or power for what I like. Dr. Ekval had moderate framed, beefy Brahmins. They weren't real big. They were a little vertically challenged, which I don't mind that. I like that. They were deep sided, deep bodied, heavy milking, calf raising kind of females. So my first big acquisition of registered Brahmins came back in 2000 with his dispersal, and then again in 2002 whenever I bought the rest of what he had left, and he had bought a donor cow from Hudgens and had flushed her, and so I bought a bunch of her daughters. And what I have to have, and this goes for my Brahman cattle, Hereford cattle, Brayford cattle, I have to have cattle that are sound on their feet and legs, that can travel, and I am an udder fanatic. I have to have good udders, and I want milk production. I mean, I'm asking for everything here, but I think it's possible. I think you can produce that ideal cow. I want milk production. I want fertility, but I want sound udder quality. I want good udder suspension with good teat size. And that has been a challenge over time because you start with these ideals and you buy cattle that you think are going to work in your operation. They may be sold to you as being this or that, and then you get them and you start breeding them, and 4 or 5 years down the road, you realize, well, maybe I made a mistake there, and that's been a big hurdle. Is that when you're trying to produce functional cattle, you've got to if when you bring back whenever I was buying cattle and getting my start, I'm sort of self supportive now, but when you're getting started, it's hard to know where to go, and I think it's so important that you identify the type of cattle that you're trying to raise and what's important to you and what your goals are there. I mean, if you're trying to breed show cattle, there's a place for all different kinds, but I think it's so important that you identify what you're trying to breed, what you're trying to raise, and then hone in on that. And that led me to Buddy Smart and S Bar Ranch when they dispersed. They had some big cows, but they had milk and they had carcass. And that's where I bought the my interest in the Hudgens Capano bull that has had an instrumental effect on my operation. I know that's really old genetics, sort of antiquated, and but if you go to looking at EPDs and you look at the milk production on his daughters, that's something that milk production is something I've infused into my Brahman herd and my F1 herd, the milk production and the marbling. Of course, the bull threw such big calves that he never had many Brahman bulls that were born. They were all steered and sent to the Ranch to Rail program back in the day. So there's lots of cark bull, and he showed to be very unique there. Kept all the females and steered all the bull calves. The issue with the birth weight, I come back and breed those females, or the Capano females, direct daughters, are really kind of too big for me. And for the way I ranch, I want a more moderate, functional, deep-sided cow. And as you know, some of those cattle, going back with 202, and some of those cattle can get pretty big. They can get a little flat-sided, and I want a little more muscle expression. So the I use that bull a lot as a breeding piece to infuse milk and marbling in my maternal lines. Although the phenotype didn't fit me perfectly, I've been working on that. I'm still working on that. But the one breeder that we lost because he dispersed back in 21, who I thought was just a really, really phenomenal human being, and was a great asset to our breed, was Johnny Nemi with Silent G Ranch. He got out, and I never, he was one of my neighbors down in New Waverly, and I never spent a lot of time looking at his cows, but Billy Wayne Key called me and asked me to, he said, "Hey, Jake, I got something I want you to come look at." He said, "I got these Silent G cows bought." And he said, "There's some stuff down here you may want to see." And I went and looked at Johnny's herd, and I was amazed at, what a good job he had been doing producing the kind of cattle that I love. So I added about 40 of what I consider to be the top pairs from that Silent G herd. I picked all the best, what I thought were the best cows with the best heifer calves, and added about 80 head from that Silent G herd into mine. And I've been really happy with that because they fit, talking about that ideal type of cow, they kind of fit that ideal, and they've complemented the females that I've been raising and producing for years. They complement them well, and they're my type.
Yes, there is. Oh, there's like so much good content here. And I have to say, when you said, do you say it Capano? Is that how you said the bull's name?
I say Capano, and I didn't name him, so I can't say for sure, but I've always said Capano.
Well, I sound like a redneck, Capano. But anyway, if you're new in the breed and you are not familiar, Google it because it's JDH and then it's Copano, Capano Manso. And I distinctly remember this bull because my family bought an interest in the bull early on, and I'm pretty sure he won Houston, right? Do you remember that?
He did win Houston, and I think those shares, from what I heard, sold like in 93 or 4, 93 or 4. I think they syndicated the bull and sold those shares for like $60,000 a piece back in the 90s.
So the bull, I just pulled him up. He was born in 92, and this is why I love digital beef. We can just look up all this stuff. He has 822 progeny. So this is so interesting because his first calves were born in 95 and he had 88 progeny. But in 96, he had 263 progeny. Well, that's got to be from all the syndicate. Well, I mean, there's a lot of them from JD Hudgens, but I'm looking through the list of those 263 head, and it's JD Hudgens, Dream Ranch, Heritage, V8, S Bar, so that bull got a lot of use
Yes, he did.
early on. That's one of the higher number progeny sires that I saw. Now, I am going to say the next year the number of progeny cut in half and it continued to decline, so take it for what it's worth, but
Well, I think we identified that birth weight issue on the bull calves.
yeah. The other thing I would tell people to do is when you Google it, there's a YouTube video of the bull. And keep in mind, this is in the 90s, but he's got like big horns. That bull is big. There's like a pickup truck in the background, and
Yeah, Chevrolet Suburban or something, and he's as tall as the truck. Yeah.
he's like dwarfing the. So there's a whole lot of stuff you can look at there.
He is, and to see that video and when you compare that to pictures of the bull, yeah, the video shows him, and he looks in the video. He's a little flat sided, and a little. He's so big. If the bull was big, thick, and fat, and had that explosive muscle pop, I guess he'd have weighed 4,000 pounds, which is not functional for our area. But the bull had some neat stuff in terms of milk and marbling.
Yeah, I always remember just hearing good things about his daughter, so that would make sense.
The daughters were phenomenal, and when I bought that interest from Buddy Smart, he gave me some insight on what I needed to do and what lines I needed to cross him with. He said small. Lex Ferguson told me the same thing. Small cows, small meat wagon, beefy cows. Well, let's reference back to the kind of cows that I have, and I have you know Ekval style cows back then, and they're beefy, moderate, thick, and it worked really well for me. If I had been breeding him to big slab-sided, flat-sided cows, it wouldn't have worked at all. But it worked for me because I had the type of cows that complemented that big frame, and it gave me a big shot of milk, and unknowingly it gave me a big shot of marbling, which back then we weren't even talking about marbling. But if you look at the bull's marbling number, he's really, really good, and it's a very, very accurate number because of the number of progeny that he has had reported.
Yeah, I'm looking that up right now. This is why he's in the top 1% of debris for marbling.
Yes, and milk. I think that if you go back and look at milk EPDs and highly accurate milk EPDs, I think that the bull ranks not in current use sires, but of all time. I think the bull ranks number three for any Brahman sire, high accuracy Brahman sire for milk EPD. So again, I'm not trying to push use of the bull by any means, but I'm saying that as a breeding piece and as a tool to kind of move me where I'm at today, I reach out there and use some big genetics, and some other cows that bull worked really well on were Diamond A, Jerry Armstrong cows, which were just awesome. I mean, the cows, I really miss having him as a Brahman breeder because he was so focused on function, production. Udder quality was magnificent on those cows, and I was able to land, quite a few Diamond A cows in my herd, and those cows, I've still got some of them, and they've had a really big impact on my operation too.
There's so many lessons to be learned here, like for new breeders, especially because we just talked about, and we didn't intend to go down this rabbit hole, but just talking, I mentioned, Okay, so we some key things I think are the bull was syndicated. A lot of people used him. He has like 800 progeny. His accuracy is so high on his PDs. It's some of the highest that I've seen. And he does rank in the top 1% for milk, but also top 1% for frame score. I thought you would like that.
That's one of those things I wasn't going to mention. And he's probably in the 95th percentile for birth weight.
I just closed out that section. Everybody needs to go look at it because I want to pull up Noble because Noble has, I mean, he's got really high accuracy and a lot of progeny too. He is, well, oh, this says Noble is in the top 50% for frame score, but that's got to be not right because he's a very large bull, right?
Yeah, very large. Well, and that scares you about the type of monster Capano was.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm like, okay, so if Noble is the midpoint, how tall was Cabano?
It's a little scary to think about.
I love it. The other funny thing I was thinking is that you were like, I love good udders. And like, how many ranchers say that? But I think we should get you guys a t shirt because like Brandon would wear that t shirt and like Stuart Watkins would wear that t shirt.
Well, it's hey, that's one of the things is we want these cattle. It's one thing to have a cow that has a quote unquote ideal udder, a little teacup udder with small teats that raises a dogie calf or a inferior calf, but it's another thing when you've got a cow that's got that ideal beautiful udder raising one of the big fat juicy calves in the pasture. I mean, that is to me is so rewarding. And udder quality when I got in Brahmins, of course I'm aging myself a little here. I mean, it doesn't seem possible that it's been 25 years, but I'm not that old. But from where udder quality was then, and you still see udder quality problems, but in my herd, like where I have the direction I have gone on udder quality in my Brahmins and my F1 cows, I'm pretty proud of that, and it's something that is a major selling point on my F1 females because when you take good milk and heavy milk and Herefords and breed them to good milk and heavy milk and Brahmins, you're going to get that hybrid vigor and heterosis effect, and you're going to get even more milk in those daughters. So if you don't start out with a premium quality, udder quality Hereford and a premium udder quality Brahmin, you have no chance of having good udder quality in your F1 females.
I might put you on the spot here, but I just want to hear off the cuff, like your answer to this. It's a two-part question, but you said the word functional a lot, and I feel like in the last 2 years that has become like a super buzzword of the industry, and even when like it with judges and stuff. Um, to you, what does that specifically mean when you say a cow is functional or a bull is functional? What do you mean by that?
To me, functional means they're able to function in a production setting and do their job. They're able to serve the function the good Lord put them on the earth to do, and that's to if it's a bull, then that would entail he needs to be able to travel. He needs to have high libido. He needs to get out there and get cows bred, even if they're cycling on a steamy, hot, 95-degree, 90% humidity day. I want him out there. If a cow's in heat, I want him breeding her. I don't want him over there under a shade tree. Bulls function, foot quality, testicle size. Those are all things that they have to have in order to do their job and do it effectively. On a female side, what is a functional cow in my eyes is that's a cow that is going to be able to maintain her body condition under normal commercial in a normal commercial production setting. I'm not talking about putting them up, and then there's reasons to put cattle up and feed them, but I'm talking about on pasture with limited supplementation, free choice minerals year round, free choice. And I'm a little archaic here. It probably cuts down their mineral consumption, but I also offer free choice salt They have that year round. And then when the grass is lush, growing and green, we're not dealing with drought or they don't get any supplementation. They're expected to get out there and do it. They're expected to raise the calf on forage and do it with limited supplementation and breed back. So I know that's asking a lot of a cow, and I had breeders that would tell me back in the day, well, those cows, they're high production and they're heavy milking, and you know here it is, it's June and they're in waist deep grass and the cows are in a declining body condition. Their body condition scores are steadily declining as they're raising the calf. Maybe they breed back, maybe they don't.
Mhm.
That doesn't work for me. I need cows that are going to get out there. I don't need to have them at a feed trough every day in order to get them bred back. I think that we're making a mistake there if we take cows that are too dependent on a feed trough and a feed sack. I want them to get out there and do it. Now, if it gets dry, certainly supplement with protein, either protein tubs or liquid feed in the wintertime. Of course, that's a challenge for all Brahman breeders. Go in there and give them a little ryegrass, fertilized ryegrass, something to give them something to eat. You got to give them a chance, but I expect them to function.
So that sparked me three more questions, if you don't mind. This is such a great discussion. Like, this is so good. Okay, I don't know which one to ask next. Okay, this is not a trick question. I just want your true answer. In general, do you think today's show cattle are functional?
No. But you asked me, you prefaced it with in general, okay?
Right, right. Yes, I will say there are definitely some that are headed in that direction, but in general.
I've seen them, absolutely. I've seen them, and I know that there are many breeders who love the show who absolutely value function. But as a general rule, that's just my honest answer, Rachel.
Brahman breeders know. You want the finest herd? You have to start with the finest Brahman bull semen, and there's no finer selection than at BRC Ranch. Our champion makers are exactly that, but we know variety is essential. We also offer semen from low birth weight bulls, polled/scurred bulls, and sexed heifer semen. BRC Ranch works to release orders within 3 to 5 business days, but you can always stop by the ranch to pick up your order too. Bring the top Brahman sires to your ranch. Go online to shopbrcatrair.com.
Okay, so this is another one. I got asked this question myself, and I was kind of stunned. I didn't know how to answer it, but the question specifically was, what EPD can you look at to determine if an animal is functional? I My response is it's not an EPD. There's not an EPD measurement, at least in the Brahmin. What would you say to that?
Well, you nail that, and I think that that's something that we kind of need. Like in the Hereford breed, there's a sustained cow fertility EPD.
Ooh, wow.
It's a really cool EPD, and I use that a lot when selecting Hereford females or Hereford bulls. I rely on that because they take in the Hereford breed, and I'm not going to go Hereford wise, but in the Hereford breed, it's mandatory if you're a member, it's mandatory whole herd reporting, which I love because every cow gets credit for a calf every year or doesn't get credit for a calf every year. So you have to report, even if she had a dead calf. Well, if she had a dead calf, she bred and she delivered a calf. It may have been dead, but she did breed. She was fertile enough to breed. And they look at calving interval, like if some of those cows bred back 30 days after she calved. There's a whole lot of different things that it's not weaning weight and yearling weight that are tied to that EPD. It has everything to do with are those females producing a calf every year. And I've found an inverse correlation with that. I mean, this is not surprising in what we've been talking about, an inverse correlation at times with that and mature cow size. There's a mature cow weight EPD as well. And you see as that mature cow weight EPD gets elevated, then I think you oftentimes see that sustained cow fertility EPD go down. And I'm not saying it happens every time, but I'm saying those cows with lower mature cow weights are going to tend to have higher sustained cow fertility EPDs. So well, I know we don't have that. One thing in my Brahmins that I would say what makes a cow functional from an EPD standpoint is what one thing that makes a cow not functional would be too big a birth weight.
Okay.
Or a bull, a cow or a bull. It's too big a birth weight. That would mark them off the list. Hey, that's not functional. If you can't breed that animal without worrying about staying up all night and pulling calves, and no, then they're not functional. If you have to worry about a female, Brahman female having a calf, then you're doing something wrong.
Well, the only thing I could think of to this is maybe to look at ratios rather than EPDs. Like, if their weaning rate ratio was, 110 or something like that. But I think ratios are only available on natural production cows, right? Like embryo calves don't go into that. So,
That's right. Well, and I mean, but Rachel, if you look at a ratio and you have a cow that ratios good and she ratios 110 on her calves on weaning weight, but she only raises one every 2 years, what's the ratio mean?
right, that's 55.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you got to consider that ratios are only useful if you take into account the cow's calving record. And that's where a sustained cow fertility EPD, I'm just dropping that out there, I think would be beneficial because it would take cows breeding and having a calf every year. And I think that would it'd be a cool thing to have, and other breeds are already doing it. We're behind there just a little bit, and that's a tool that other breeds already have available, and it's something I'd really like to for us as Brahman breeders to be able to have and utilize.
I would love that. And I also want to go on the record and say that I know I would have some cows that are good in that area, like probably not as good as yours, but I would also have some cows that are really bad in that area. And I think that's okay. Like I'm not I don't really know. I'm definitely not claiming that I have the most perfect herd. Like there's always places to get better, and sometimes if you have a number like that you can see you're good or bad, it helps you move the needle because you've got a direction to go, you know?
Absolutely, it helps move you forward, and we all have those cows. I mean, we all have some cows that don't breed quite as fast as we like them to, or that miss a calf. But like in today's market, a cow in my F1 program, let's say she bred back a little later than she should have. Yes, her salvage value is great, but so is the value of an F1 heifer. And if in order to capitalize on today's market, starting with a heifer from scratch, even if you have an open Brahman cow, if she can produce you another heifer, and as long as she's not an infertile cow or a non-breeder, I'm not saying that you should extend that courtesy to a cow that is not doing her job and is not reproductively sound. But I'm saying if you have a cow that just bred back a little slower, she still bred back, but she didn't breed back as fast, and her calving interval is going to be a little bit longer. Right now, I'd be prone to be a little easier on her.
Hey, that's an excellent point that I really hadn't thought of. Yeah, even if you just give her one extra month and you could get that calf, that's a big paycheck.
It's a big paycheck right now. It's not always, and sometimes in drought conditions or different lower markets on calves. Sometimes I think you have to market those cattle a little differently depending upon, you know, what the market climate is.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that let's move into that discussion. I do want to talk about how do you market your cattle? You have registered Brahmins and F1s, and what does the marketing strategy look like for Dixon Ranches?
Well, I'm not a very good marketer. I'll start by saying that I don't do near as much Facebook posting as I should. I should be more engaged with the people who are interested in what we're doing. But I ranch for a living, and I'm actually having this conversation parked in a hayfield where I'll be back on a tractor cutting hay here when we finish up. It's like I don't have time to sit on the computer all day, and I'm sort of a one man show, so I don't advertise and I don't market. But my motto or my tagline is quality sells itself, and that has been very true for me. In that I have had people. I mean, I put myself through college, and I've had replacement heifer customers who have come to me for so many years that their entire herds of 100 or 150 cows, every cow in the pasture is is a Dixon Ranches cow. And so by producing quality cattle, I honestly don't I don't have to. It's a fault of mine. I don't have to work too hard at selling them because I've established a rapport and relationships with so many repeat customers who have larger orders in the commercial sector. You know, they don't want just one or two heifers; they want a big group of heifers, and so they tend to come to me, and I typically I don't have enough cattle to sell on my F1s. Now, my Brahmins, a little different story. I am raising my Brahmin cattle to ranch them. I'm not. I put in way too much work, effort, research. You know, blood, sweat, tears, lots of tears. You know, we as we talked about that cow in the beginning. There's lots of times it hasn't worked, but I put forth so much effort that I just don't sell very many Brahman heifers. I am raising them to be what I want and what I know will work and will function. And therefore, even though like right now we're in a ridiculously good market, I've got a lot of Brahman heifers that I'm going to be weaning and already weaned and yearlings and 2 year olds and 3 year olds and 4 year olds. I could hit a pretty good payday right now, but I would be sacrificing what I've worked so hard to get to, is in terms of calf raising ability and you know just general cow function. And I'm just not really for any amount of money. I'm not willing to sacrifice that. I'm raising my Brahman cattle to ranch them, and I will sell a few. I've got some customers who have a little, you know, smaller herds of pretty well exclusively Dixon cows that have, you know, have good luck with them. And when they need more, they come to me. Hey, I need to buy a couple of heifers. Okay, well, you got to twist my arm. I don't want to, and they know I don't want to sell my heifers. But the bulk and the majority of my marketing is to repeat customers. And with the advent of Facebook, I get people that just randomly reach out all the time wanting heifers or wanting a heifer here or you know a few heifers, and so I get people. If I were to advertise, I'm sure that I would get lots more calls, but I'm spread pretty thin on my numbers already and people buying from me, so I haven't put a whole lot of effort in there because I can sell as many as I can produce right now already. But I'm always open. I love yes.
I know that I have held you up for an hour and you're sitting there on the tractor, but this is so good. I was like, we could talk 25 more minutes on this. But there's so much like what you said in there. I mean, quality sells itself. Yes, absolutely. Like, I love how, what it made me kind of think is you don't have to be loud and braggy to sell your cattle, or you don't have to be loud and braggy to produce cattle that have value. Like, these are huge takeaways, I think, that people can really learn from.
I think having establishing relationships with your customers. I know you guys believe in this. If establishing relationships with your customers and them knowing that you're being honest, fair, and you're telling them, I don't hide anything. If somebody wants to see a birth date or a birth weight on one of my calves, I pull out my calving book and I'll hand it to them. Look through there. I'm not trying to hide anything from you. Okay, well, no, that calf wasn't born in April. That calf was born in February. Or, if I'm an open book and people know that, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing because I'm always going to be honest, even if it's not what you want to hear. I'm going to be open, upfront, and honest and transparent because I feel that that's the way that you establish relationships that are meaningful and long lasting.
I love that. I want a couple more things. I'm just kind of jotting down notes. I want to talk about the prices right now because you are selling F1s, and F1s are selling at a premium right now. Well, a lot of cattle are. Just to kind of set the stage, I was talking with a rancher from Florida earlier in the week, and we were talking about bull prices, and he said to me that in today's market, any good bull is going to cost you at least $12,500. And I kind of like turned my head a little bit because we sell our low birth weight bulls at the ranch and they're really good, but our base price is 7,500. And I'm happy to get it too, like. And so I asked Brandon, I was like, Brandon, my friend told me this. That's $5,000 more than what we're selling our bulls for. Do you think we need to go up on our pricing? And he said no, because we have loyal customers who come to us every year and buy 3 to 5 bulls, and they've been doing it for 5 years, like in the beginning when we were starting out and we're kind of unknown, and we want to be loyal to those customers. So just because the market prices are higher, we're not going to go up on our pricing. And I was like, okay, I agree with that. But what have you seen with the F1 prices, and are you adjusting your prices, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm in the same boat there. I'm seeing reports, and I mean we all see the Facebook reels where you see the heifer calves selling right off the cow through the sale barn for you know 28, 29, $3,000. We see all this stuff, and we see these special sales that where these open heifers are bringing $4,000 and $5,000, and pairs. Good friend of mine who markets lots of really good F1 Brayford cattle, Tom Johnson. That they've sold some cattle, some pairs that were
Yep.
upper sixes, $6,000, $7,000 pairs. I've tried, and while I do want to get in on that, and I'm going to probably hold back some F1 heifers this year to grow them out and get them a little bigger, maybe breed them and try to get in a little bit of that. I'm not going to throw my customers away. I've got a couple of guys that have bought open heifers from me every year for years, and I'm going to sell them those heifers, and I'm going to sell them. They're going to they're definitely higher this year than normal, but I'm still trying to be fair and in line with the market for what they are, not what they could be worth or what they could bring me, but kind of, hey, what are they worth? And that number has been about 3250 is the number. I mean, I don't mind sharing that with you. 3250 for open weaned F1 Brayford heifers. That's a number that, from a ranching standpoint, certainly we're doing fine selling $3,250 open heifers. But in the current market climate, that's a price point where the buyer who's buying the heifer has some room to add some value there as well, and that they're not going to be holding the bag on something that they're upside down on, because those females are going to get more valuable. So I've tried. I don't want to overinflate the price. I want to get as much as I can while still being fair to my customers. I think we kind of think in the same way there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I do have two more questions, if you don't mind. I just want to kind of wrap up, move in that direction of wrapping up. But
We're all good. I've enjoyed the conversation.
oh, okay, good, good. Well, is there any specific challenges you can think of that you have been through in the last 25 years that you think, maybe other breeders might be, new breeders might be going through the same? And would you have any examples of those and advice to share?
I will. And one thing that I'll say, I feel very blessed to be able to do what I do on a daily basis. There are so many people in life that go to work at a job they hate, doing something that they do not want to be doing, also that they can retire when their best years are behind them. They can retire and buy, I'm happy for those people to be able to do it. I realize not everybody can, but I am so incredibly fortunate to be able to do what I love with these cattle on a daily basis, whenever so many people work their whole life doing something they don't want to be doing, so that they can retire and buy their little piece of heaven and have their cows to take care of. I mean, I see it and I hear it all the time. So I'm so fortunate there. But hinging on that, time is the biggie. I am sort of kind of a one man operation. I run a lot of cows on quite a bit of country. Probably not nearly as big as I used to be, but still probably ranch cattle on close to 4,000 acres of land here in Walker County. And I'm pretty well a one man show. I do all my own fertilizer work. I do a good bit of my own weed spraying, although I hire some of that out, and I bale all of my own hay, which takes me, normally on a normal year, I'll put up about 1,500. It's not that many, 1,500 6x5 rolls a year. So one man doing that much work with limited part-time help is a pretty good chore. That's a challenge, and in order to for a ranching operation, unless you're selling some really really high value cattle, if you're ranching normal cows, in order for a ranching operation to be able to sustain your family, you can't hire everything done. So many things in a ranching deal, you've got to do it yourself. And that's a challenge, because my kids like to say and we've talked about this, that there's a right way, there's a wrong way, and then there's my way. And my way is really the only my way is the way that counts. And I'm proud that my kids, who are starting to, I've got two in college and one that's a senior in high school, who all have an interest, thankfully, in the cattle, are taking some ownership there and being involved and helping. My oldest daughter, Mackenzie, they all have their own places. One, Mackenzie is a phenomenal tractor operator. And so when she's off from college, hey, she's coming home to make money. It reminds me of myself at that age. Like, hey, she's got some time off from college. She's coming this weekend to help me bale hay. She's got a little time off from college. She's headed home to make money. And she is a phenomenal operator, and her brain works like mine. And so it's just so wonderful to have kids that prioritize doing things the right way. And so she's my hay cutter, raker. I do all my baling. And then my middle daughter she's really into the whole management side and the breeding pieces. And then my son Zane, I really think Zane would rather hunt and fish, but he does like the cows. But the challenges are there is for me is like I somehow getting the kids involved to where, like I said, I'm a seventh generation in our area, and my kids are the eighth generation. And how do we keep that going to where there's a tenth generation still involved in having cattle? That's, I think, a question we all ask ourselves. What can we do to engage our kids to where they love it the way we love it?
Hmm. Yeah, that is a challenge. I might have a little bit of a different mentality on that because I mean, I've seen in my own family and, in my siblings that, I mean, just like any family, different people have different passions. And one child may absolutely love it and one may not at all. And I don't want to be a parent that puts pressure on my kids of you have to do this just because mom and dad did it. And I don't think you do either. I don't think,
No, I don't.
yeah, I think we agree on that. Did you follow the Churchill Hereford dispersal a couple of months ago?
I did.
Yeah, so that really got me thinking because I mean, I do you remember what the total gross was? I mean, it was multi-millions.
It was a barn burner.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't know their story at all, but I'm assuming that they didn't have a next generation who actively wanted to carry it on. And I was like, that's a business, that's a ranch that operated as a business, and they got it right because they sold out. They, got a huge payday, and I consider that a win. I would consider that this is a person that operated this as a business and he won. Like I think there's a misconception that like maybe having a dispersal or to down changing your operation just if your kids don't want to be involved is a failure, and I don't think it's a failure at all. I think it's an opportunity.
Well, and I agree. If we've done things right, and I've looked at that, like, at the like with the current market climate, like there's times when you look and you're like, oh my goodness, if I were ever going to get out or downsize, wow, it would be a great time. And I'm like, what would I do with myself? I'd want to buy some more cows.
I know, but would you if you had to do an exit strategy like that, would you keep your land? Like would you hope that your family, maybe they're not like 10th generation Brahman breeders, but maybe they are 10th generation landowners or something like that?
Well, a lot of the country that I operate on is lease country as far as the big land goes. I don't think that my kids will ever sell land that I own and that I bought and that I own. I don't think it'll happen. I think that they are deeply rooted there. That land that is owned, I I I think you'd have to pry it out of their hands, and hopefully that is something that is very meaningful to me. Is that they may want to raise, you know, bluebirds or honeybees or whatever they want to do. Whenever I'll support them and I'll love them, but I am encouraged that is seeing them as they're getting old enough to really be involved. It's been great seeing their little minds work. I say their little minds like they're little kids, but it's great to see their minds working, and then they can make that choice for themselves. And I'm going to love them and support them, and whatever path they choose to take, I'll tell them like my grandpa told me: go get yourself a high-paying job, and then you can worry about the cows later. If you love them and you want them then, and if you decide that's something you want to do, then that's great too. But by no means do I feel that they need to do it, because I'm sure I'll be doing it till I till they carry me away.
Right. No such thing as retirement.
No, no, that word doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, the kind of the last thing I want to just, give an observation and touch on is, gosh, this has been a wonderful podcast. And anyone listening, I think they would they can, if they didn't know you before, what they know now is that you're a business person, you're a cow man, you have a very logical, ethical mindset. And I saw a Facebook post, a Facebook comment that you had made maybe a few months ago, and in that post, you were really speaking up and advocating for having ethics as a cattle breeder, integrity as a cattle breeder, and I fully believe we need more voices like that that do stand for that. Do you have any thoughts on, advice or thoughts on what that means in our industry right now?
Rachel, I think that's I put it out there, and that was a long-winded post. I love to write. It's one of my favorite things. I don't normally someone normally can't catch me long enough to have a long conversation because I'm always on the go. But I love to write, and I wrote that because I just see an absence of integrity in different sectors. I think that I don't think no one is ever going to agree. And this is not Brahman specific. This could be politics. It doesn't matter what topic we're talking about. Not everyone is ever going to agree on anything. I mean, there's not going to be a unanimous. When you talk about large numbers of people, you're not ever going to have unanimous consent or dissent. People are going to have different opinions. But I think that as we argue our case, whatever that case may be, I think that if we present our thoughts, feelings, sometimes emotions about whatever we're talking about in an honest, transparent way, I think that people who may have a different stance on that topic will at least respect us, and they'll get a better chance to see where our heart's at, and they'll get a better chance to understand where we're coming from. I think when you take honesty out of that equation, or if someone, and again, this is not specific to our breed, but it's, I think I mean, from a personal standpoint, we just need more people who will stand up for what's right, regardless of whether it's popular. I remember that saying. I think it was from back in the '90s. We've been young. It probably was on a T-shirt or a slogan. Or I may have in a youth group. I may have seen it at some point. What's popular is not always right, and what's right is not always popular. And that's always stuck with me. It's like one of those things in the back of my mind. It's not about popularity. Some things are about doing what's right, and I think that even someone who disagrees with you, if you present your case in an honest and transparent form, then you might find out that the people who you think are against you are actually for you. You may not disagree at all. You may actually share the same feelings. You may be striving for the same goal, but you just if you feel like the person is telling you something that's coming from a place that's not up and up, then I really believe you're gonna feel less inclined to listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I am not a person. Well, I I find myself personally trying to work on being better at, having difficult conversations, but doing it in a way that is respectful and in like coming from a place of love and like in wanting greater good for everyone, rather than like a place of drama or jealousy or something like that. And I do feel that if like you said, if people have differences and different opinions, but both people are rooted in the same concepts of like good and honesty and kindness, you can have different opinions, but you can work it out, you know. And I appreciated you saying, making kind of the statements that you did of, because they were just rooted in honesty. You can't go wrong by telling the truth.
Right. Well, and some people, and I'm not speaking of anyone specifically, but some people who are being in my finding, some people who are trying to hide something, who are being dishonest, don't always appreciate honesty.
Yeah, that's right.
That they may become defensive when you are totally open and honest, bec- and I think that speaks maybe more to their intent. But I really feel like it's a challenge in today's in our society today. I really believe this. It's not just cattle related or what it's our society. We have all polarized these polarized factions and people, you know, that act like they hate each other, be it Republican, Democrat, just everybody acts like they hate each other. Hey, we're all living this thing called life, and we're all trying to do better for ourselves and our families and our cows. And why do people have to be so you know polarized? I don't know how else to put it. Why just because your agenda doesn't fit mine? We're all in this together. At the end of the day, we really are, especially in cattle. We're all in this together, and the cows are the focus. And so, if I was going to say anything with regard to our, I love our Brahman breed. The Brahman breed pays my bills, be it through F1s, just variety of ways. Brahman cattle support me. They make my living. I want our Brahman breed to thrive, and I want it to prosper. And I think that a way for that to happen is for us all to be focused on things that matter. Be it, how do we make our Brahman cattle better? Through different, performance, talking about having conversations like we've had about sustained cow fertility and what makes a cow functional. And we could have talked for several hours here about a whole lots of different topics, marbling and the feeding sector, which I've done a lot of feeding of cattle. People are probably tired of hearing me talk. You are too, but we, the, there's so many things that we need to work on and we need to focus on to make keep our not keep to make our Brahman breed more relevant in today's cattle deal. We need to be focused on the issues that really matter, and those are
That's shows, right? That's the thing that matters most is who's judging the show.
yeah. Yeah. How many shows have you, in 25 years, Rachel? How many shows have you ever seen me at? Unless I'm watching. Listen, I am I am so supportive of that. It's great exposure for our breed. My son has a Brahman show heifer that he's going to be showing. It showed last year and this year. I mean, and I'm very proud of that. But at the end of the day, it's great promotion for our breed. It gets us exposure. It's all great stuff. But if a lot of the people, please, no one that's listening, I hope no one takes this the wrong way. I wish more people had to make a living ranching these Brahman cows. If I was going to one take home that I would stress, I wish more people had to make a living ranching Brahman cows. And if they did, I feel that their focus would be on things that matter more than the show ring.
Yeah, I love that. I said that the first time we did our beef program, and we unloaded and we calculated and figured out how much money we were getting from, one harvested animal. I said, I wish every single Brahman breeder could go through this exercise and, and just see just once what it's like. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a little different than having a high paying job that allows you to buy high dollar cattle and haul them around to shows in lots of buckles and ribbons. And again, I'm not in any way hating on that. I'm not against that. I think it has its purpose, and I think it has value. But as a breed, as a Brahmin breed, I really think that as breeders we all need to come together, and we need to remember that we're producing beef, and we need to keep that in the front of our minds, and we need to be focused on things that matter, and that's that's the many of the things we talked about
Hmm.
today.
Yeah. Well, this has been an absolutely great podcast. It was so good, Jake. I just got to say thank you. Oh, we also, I've forgotten this on sometimes, but I do like to close by asking every guest to tell me who their favorite Brahmin animal is of all time. I don't know if yours is Capano or if there's a different one, but do you have a Brahmin animal that sticks out as your favorite Brahmin of all time?
It would be a cow that probably, some people who've bought cattle from me for years would know this cow, and I've made some Facebook posts over the years. And if you know me, it's pretty rare that I put a specific cow on Facebook, but it's a cow that I raised. She was a Buddy Smart cow, S bar 240/1. She was a Capano daughter, and this any specific animal. She was an own daughter of Capano, out of an own daughter of the Bros Manso 949, going back to Charlie breeding a 78/1 cow on the was her mama, that I think Buddy bred. She was a Hudgens cow, and then I think Mr. Duplantis, he was a big fan of the 78/1 cow, which I think they had just you know I've heard y'all talk about acquisitions from the Duplantis herd in the past. So the cow was long as a well rope. She lived to be 22 years old, and I finally took her to the sale barn because like 2 years ago, because I didn't want to see her when they get to a certain age, they just get to a point where you don't want to see them just deteriorate, and she just got so old that I had to. I figured that was better than digging a hole for her. I thought that was to give her the most dignity. So anyway, 240/1. Anybody that's a customer of mine definitely know the 240 cow. If I had to put my finger on a specific cow, that'd be her.
22 years old. That's awesome.
240, and had and got a bunch of F1 daughters of hers, Brahman daughters. She had a tremendous impact and she's also a reason in a way that I learned how to breed the Capano bull effectively, and knowing, like, wait, how do I produce that cow? Start studying pedigrees, bloodlines, body types. How can I incorporate this giant bull and make it work because of those traits that we talked about that I like? And 240 was kind of my she was the key in my figuring out how to put the pieces together. So she was very special to me. She was my old girl, and I miss her.
Yeah. Well, I love that. If you have a picture of her, you should share her on your Facebook, like here recently, so people when they hear the podcast, they can look. Yeah. Well, we are at an hour and 26 minutes, and it has flown by. I try to keep it at an hour, but Brandon says that he likes listening to other podcasts and other breeds that can go 2 hours or more. And I kind of think we have some Brahman breeders that are the same. Like, if you love talking about good cattle, you can just talk and talk and talk, you know?
It is. There's some truth there, and I've enjoyed the conversation.
Well, just as we wrap up, conversations like this, it really remind me that the foundation of every great ranch is it's not necessarily show ring banners, or it's not luck, or it's not, the flashiest thing or shortcuts, but the tried and true things like functional cattle, good ethics, and steadiness is what can keep you going through decades. So I love that. And thank you for all of your insight. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on Over the Hump.
Absolutely. Take care.
You've been listening to the Over the Hump podcast. Our passion is Brahman cattle, and it runs deep. And this show is about its rich history, industry trends, and stories that define the American Brahman. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at BR Cottrare. See you next time on the Over the Hump podcast.